So what we're going to do here is configure this more Siemens controller for dual analog outputs. Currently right now it's set up for factory configure option 101. You see all these function blocks linked together to form a PID control loop. Currently this only has a single analog output block. We want to add a second analog output block so we can drive two valves through two cables from the same controller for the purpose of doing split ranging. So here's how we're going to do this. We need to add one more function block to this program. To do this, I'm going to flip down this cover and get into the configuration menu. I hit the enter exit config button where it says loop. Now I'm going to step down a couple of steps, and at this point I can either use my arrow keys or my knob to scroll my different options. And notice I've got several options here: edit tag, edit sequence number, edit function block, add function block, delete function block. Well, what do you think we want to do out of all those?
Probably add
function block. Sure. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit the store button. Actually, it's going to step down, not the store button yet. At this point, it's showing me here are all the blocks I could add to my loop. It's basically calling up all the blocks that have not been used yet, and there's lots of them. So which block am I wanting to add here? Analog out 2, exactly. And we'll notice as we go there, like I said, I can use buttons here as well as that. There's an analog output 2. You don't see an analog output 1 because it's already being used. It's only showing me the blocks that are non-used at this point. Make sense? So I hit store. There we go. So I've just added a function block, and it jumps me up one level in the menu. At this point, I want to edit the function block that we just added. So now I want to step down where it says edit, and now if I go left and right, here are all the function blocks that are in that program. And notice how both analog out 1 and analog out 2 now exist in that same program. If we had done this before, we never would have seen A out 2 because we haven't added it yet. So now I want to step down into that. Actually, before I do that, I'll go into analog output 1 just to explore what we currently have. This is analog output 1. If I step down into this to edit, I've got several parameters here. And if I take a look alphabetically in my manual, it shows me what all the parameters are for each block. So here's analog output. My first parameter is range pointer, where it gets its 0 to 100% range from. The next parameter is input S. That's where does it get the data for the S or signal input. If I step down to that, it says A/M.01. What this means is, this is how we link each function block together with another function block. We tell each function block where it gets its input from. So in the case of the factory configure option 101, analog output block number 1 gets its S input from the O1 output of the auto manual block. So the analog output 1 block gets its S input from the auto manual block channel 1. And you can see this in the diagram. Auto manual block channel 1 is the line where that connects. So you make these line connections by assigning where each input comes from. Now, just to let you know, there is a graphic computer program you can use. Plug a cable in the controller and do all this graphically by clicking and dragging lines. Much nicer than what we're about to do, but we don't have that set up here, so we have to step to the menu. What I want to do here is step up until I get to analog output 2. If I go into here, and I say input S, and I step down, it's going to say unconfigured. It's a brand new block. It's not connected to anything yet. So what do you think we have to do here? Yeah, and as I scroll this back and forth, it shows me here are all the outputs of other blocks in that program that are available to connect to. So I just find automanual.01, and I hit store. There we go. Now just to make sure the other parameters match, I'm going to go back to analog output number 1. Remember range pointer? I step down into that. It says it gets its range pointer from the PID block. I want to make sure this other analog output gets its range pointer from the PID block as well. Unconfigured. So now we have to say PID. That's where it knows what its appropriate range is, 0 to 100%. I'm going to store that. Step up again, analog output number 1. Let's step down into that. Analog output number 1 also has a D input, which according to the book, the D is the disconnect. It's an input that will basically tell this block to disable itself. If I go into that, you'll see it's unconfigured. So even the original analog output number 1 has no connection on the D input. And that's cool, so I don't need a connection here either. One more time. And that's it. That's it for our parameters. Input D, input S, and range pointer. That's really the only three we have to worry about on this block. So going over to analog output number 2, we have range pointer, which is now going to PID. We have input S, which is going to auto manual block.01, and input D, which should be unconfigured. So right now the two analog output blocks are really identical in their configuration. Make sense?
Yes.
That means we're done. We've just added a second analog output block to this controller. So now, when we hook up our wires and dial this out on manual mode 0 to 100%, we ought to get 420 milliamps out of both of those analog output channels. That's how we do it.